Chapter 976, Rank 1. The Cry of the Sword Throughout the Heaven and the Earth. Lu Shu did not take much time to train his swordplay before it reached peak rank 2. It had happened just a few days ago. Ordinary people would be stuck at the bottleneck for a long time as they had to pursue an even higher level, and continuously explore the route to achieve higher levels. In the end, they would find the way. But Lu Shu was different. He was already a peak rank 2 before he had come to the Luniverse. Li Xianyi had said that to break through, one had to find their own path. Chen Bailey had also said the same thing. A very long time ago, Lu Shu would occasionally think about what his own path was, but he could not figure it out. Thus, when the rank 1 soldier was about to attack him at full speed, he looked on helplessly as the young man suddenly turned and looked up at the young girl on the tree branch. He asked curiously, "Right. Xiaoyu, what do you think my path is?" Lu Xiaoyu paused for 2 seconds. Being a thief. From Lu Shu's distress, plus 666. This scene was familiar. There were times on Earth when Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu had a similar conversation. She had always replied with a thief. Lu Shu felt as if he had been transported back into the past. "Are you done talking?" the soldier asked in a cold tone. From Yi Qian's distress, plus 666. But he suddenly realized that Lu Shu seemed as if he was spacing out. He had lost his concentration looking at something in the forest. Yi Qian wanted to take this chance to kill Lu Shu. But the moment he moved, he sensed an immense threat. Lu Xiaoyu, who was on the branch, said in a cold tone, "If you move, you will die." Outside, Sun Zhongyang and the rest suddenly realized that the forest was very quiet. But they felt that something was wrong. Everyone knew that there was a rank 1 expert inside. Once they fought, it would be earth-shaking. For example, when Sun Zhongyang and the rest had fought the slaves, the collision of energy could be seen from dozens of kilometers away. It was splendid. Thus, it was very strange that the forest was so quiet. Sun Zhongyang wanted to go in and take a look, but he was worried that an accident would happen inside. "Is it possible that Lu Yulu has died?" Songbo suddenly asked. "It is possible that they have overestimated their abilities and tried to fight a rank 1 with their rank 2 abilities," said Mo Xiaoya calmly. "They might have ended up in a mishap when they were not careful." "No." Sun Zhongyang said, "Songbo, you said that the people who were protecting them in the dark had not attacked. Some accident must have happened inside." "Accident?" Everyone pondered about it. What accident could have happened? Is he negotiating with that fellow and is going to betray us? Mo Xiaoya was very worried. Needless to say, the moment this possibility was raised, everyone accepted it. "But the price that we have offered is already very high. Even those mercenary soldiers would not be able to exceed us," said Mo Xiaoya. "Wait." Sun Zhongyang said with certainty. Lu Shu was thinking of a problem in the forest. What exactly was the Tao? It should be a method of communication between the heaven and the earth. Li Xianyi had said that in the Hall of Swords, one spirit and willpower would communicate with the heaven and the earth. Sword energy was the Tao, and the Tao was resonance. The heaven and the earth were vast and boundless. There were countless forms of Tao. None were superior or inferior. The core of the Hall of Swords version of the Tao was thought that could affect the heaven and the earth. This was a low-leveled annotation that had been formed after Lu Shu had explained it. Thus, countless people were stuck at rank 2 for the remainder of their lives. At this stage, aptitude was more important than resources. Staunch people with a strong mind, like Nie Ting, would easily advance. As the head of the heavenly network, Nie Ting had to settle many odd jobs every day. But his mind was never affected. His determination lay in protection and massacre. But, the Hall of Swords Tao, and Nie Ting's Tao, were not Lu Shu's Tao. Thus, Lu Shu suddenly thought about it. What was his most staunch belief? It was as if they had returned to the time he sat on the rooftop with Lu Xiaoyu at sunset. Back then, Lu Xiaoyu had made a mistake and attacked the wrong person. She hoped that Lu Shu would be able to forgive her, but Lu Shu had never blamed her in the first place. The orange rays from the sunset were like beams of light that engulfed the ground and the crowds. It was very comfortable. Lu Xiaoyu asked Lu Shu. Lu Shu, will you still step forward bravely for me in the future? Lu Shu confidently said, yes, of course. If someone scolds me, can I still hit him? I'm referring to a simple beating, not like today. You can. What if someone hits me? Then beat him up. What if someone wants to kill me? Then kill him first. What if the whole world wants me dead? Lu Shu was stunned. As he saw the last ray of light being enveloped by the darkness, then wreak havoc on this world. Time was like a circle. The character that Lu Shu had hidden would never be destroyed by the world. It was willpower that was surging through his veins. It was as if he was born to be the ruler of the world. No matter whether it was cultivation or stealing resources, it was as if everything that Lu Shu had done was to ensure that he and Lu Xiaoyu survived. He worked hard to train and survive so that he could press forward courageously. If there was a mountain in their path, they would move the mountain away. Even if we eventually die, that is the way of the world, said Lu Shu calmly. His tone was extremely calm. He did not seem like himself. His eyes were as deep as an abyss. But at the next moment, the cry of the sword throughout the heaven and the earth could be heard within a 50-kilometer radius. The trees started to tremble. Even the ground was shaking. Sun Zhongyang and the rest were observing the movements in the forest. The moment the cry of the sword was produced, they all coughed up a mouthful of blood. The cry of the sword had injured their internal organs. Although they were already injured, they were still rank 1s and rank 2s. How could they be easily injured by the sound of the Tao? The area affected by the sound of the Tao when Lu Shu advanced to rank 1 was unprecedented. It had never happened before, and would never happen again. A rank 1 would typically only affect a radius of 5 kilometers. Some who lacked resources were not even able to reach a radius of 5 kilometers. But when Lu Shu had advanced to rank 2, he had already produced the sound of the Tao. When he advanced to rank 1, an even more surprising scene would occur. But Sun Zhongyang and the rest did not know. How would they know the distance that the sound of the Tao affected? No one could do an accurate calculation. Furthermore, they were in the wilderness. The mercenary soldiers had decided to lie in ambush here as they were afraid of new and unexpected problems that would affect their mission. But this was the first time that Sun Zhongyang had heard that the sound of the Tao produced by someone advancing to rank 1 could injure people. Not only was he surprised, Su Mujuan, Mo Xiaoya, and the rest were astonished as well. Chapter 977, Rank 1. Rise of the Milky Way. Who advanced to rank 1? Sun Zhongyang asked in shock. Lu Yulu? It seemed as if this was the only possibility. If not, who else would advance? But the sound of the Tao was very loud. It was almost unbelievable. The sound of the Tao came from the resonance with the heaven and the earth. Sun Zhongyang was puzzled. Given the scale of the resonance, did the person not create their own rules? How far did the sound of the Tao reach? Mo Xiaoya wiped the blood beside her mouth and asked with confusion. It must be beyond a radius of 5 kilometers, right? Not only did the palace geniuses compare their slaves and abilities, they also compared how far the sound of their Tao traveled. In order to build the foundation of their families, some new wealthy aristocrats would spoil their geniuses with excessive enthusiasm. As a result, some geniuses only had passable aptitude, but had already reached rank 1. While they had reached the realm of a rank 1, they were not as strong as those who had trained hard. Thus, geniuses like Sun Zhongyang and Mo Xiaoya, who had relied on their own abilities to reach their current strength, looked down upon the so-called geniuses who who had rapidly advanced. In their circle, once they knew that the sound of their Tao did not reach a radius of 10 kilometers, they would not pay attention to them. But there was another kind of situation. The sound of the Tao would go beyond 5 kilometers. 5.5 to 6 kilometers were possible. It was said that for the senior disciple of the Sword Hut, the sound of his Tao had reached a radius of 9.5 kilometers when he advanced to rank 1. The palace was in a panic for a period of time. In the end, reality proved that the heaven and the earth did not lie. The wider the range of the sound of the Tao, the stronger the person would be. How can we be sure in this wilderness? Sun Zhongyang laughed bitterly. Typically, when someone in the Luniverse advanced to rank 1, they would ask someone to observe. It was a grand occasion in the palace, like the Imperial College examinations. Countless people would surround and observe them. Many kind-hearted people would measure the range of the sound of the Tao. But now, even if Sun Zhongyang and the rest wanted to verify the range that Lu Shu had produced, they were helpless. On one hand, they did not have enough manpower. On the other hand, they could not move easily. They had already been severely injured. They had recovered for over a day, but now, they were injured again. They had never expected this to happen. They had just been sitting on the flatbed cart and observing the situation. No matter whether this young man was able to defeat the mercenary soldiers, they had no part or ability in this. They had just been observing, but had been hit by a stray arrow. How did this make sense? From Sun Zhongyang's distress, plus 777. From Mo Xiaoya's. But, even if they did not have a way to measure the sound of the Tao produced by Lu Shu, Sun Zhongyang was very certain. It has gone beyond a radius of 5 kilometers. Perhaps it has reached 7.5 kilometers. Mo Xiaoya furrowed her eyebrows. Are you overestimating it? Can he really reach 7.5 kilometers? But, their imagination was restricted by their own views. At that moment, no bird within a 50-kilometer radius dared to land on a tree. Lu Shu stood still. He felt the breathing of the heaven and the earth. He sensed the alignment of his spirit with the heaven and the earth. So this was the power of a rank 1. The chains on Lu Shu's body that had been imposed by Dream Chooser broke. The celestial map emerged. Lu Shu could sense that the Seal of Lands was excited. The gourd in the Seal of Lands was greedily breathing in the resonance that radiated from Lu Shu's body to feed and heal itself. At that moment, everything that belonged to Lu Shu started to return. The stars in his celestial map suddenly started to shine brightly, as if the Milky Way was rising. But due to the sudden changes, the price of training both the celestial map and his spirit chi suddenly came. At first, when the celestial map was not locked up, any spirit chi that entered his body would be banished. This was the exclusivity of the celestial map as a higher-leveled technique. But now, the realm of spirit chi was higher than that of the celestial map. For the celestial map, it was the first time that the celestial map was on par with spirit chi. But the spirit chi had already been distributed throughout Lu Shu's blood. Every inch of his body had grown stronger because of the success of spirit chi in training his body. Thus, celestial powers and spirit chi fought each other in Lu Shu's body. Lu Xiaoyu suddenly realized that this short burst of effort had left Lu Shu sweating profusely. Sun Zhongyang and the rest suddenly realized that among the sound of the Tao that filled the heaven and the earth, it was as if something else was suppressing the sound. No. More accurately, it was relentlessly suppressing the heaven and the earth. What was able to suppress the heaven and the earth? But before Sun Zhongyang and the rest could figure it out, it suddenly disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Was that an illusion? Sun Zhongyang asked, puzzled. It wasn't an illusion. I felt it as well. Mo Xiaoya shook her head and said, but I have never seen or heard of this. At that moment, Lu Xiaoyu suddenly saw Lu Shu sigh. He looked up and smiled to Xiaoyu. I have walked through this path. He did not talk about what path he had taken or how he had walked through it. From the start to the end, Lu Xiaoyu had no intention of helping Lu Shu. She clearly knew that he had to walk this path alone. Furthermore, there was nothing that Lu Shu could not do. The soldier called Yi Qian was completely silent. He did not know how to deal with this situation. Yi Qian's many years of experience allowed him to build a strong judgment. Rank 1s had outstanding intuition. Thus, Yi Qian understood one thing. He could not defeat him. He might not even be able to defeat him if 5 or 6 of him rushed up to attack him at the same time. Yi Qian had killed many rank 1s in his many years of experience. Thus, he knew that even if they were of the same rank, there could be very stark differences. Therefore, he could understand the state of this young man. It was as if he was invincible, except against the master realm. But Yi Qian could not understand. This young man had just advanced to rank 1. Why was he so powerful? What would it be like if he was a fully trained rank 1? Lu Shu suddenly turned back to look at Yi Qian. What did you say just now about relying on something to live on for the past years? Who are you killing? Yi Qian thought about it and suddenly said, sorry. From Yi Qian's distress, plus 999. Before Lu Shu could say anything, Lu Xiaoyu said, do you feel that the two of you are quite similar in some ways? Lu Shu was dumbfounded. From Lu Shu's distress, plus 666. Yi Qian could no longer say anything. Everything would be unnecessary. Lu Shu sighed with emotion. In movies and stories, after the main character advanced, they would have an army of weak enemies to defeat. Even though they could not defeat him, they still charged forth without fear. He was happy just thinking about it. But why did he receive this kind of treatment here? Once Yi Qian knew that he could not defeat Lu Shu, he gave up. Who approved of this? Chapter 978, Boss Lu. My name is Yi Qian and I am a soldier. Now, I am panicking. Yi Qian looked at Lu Shu. What did you say? Fight me, said Lu Shu in an unhappy tone. If he did not fight and retaliate after advancing to rank 1, it was like traveling in cotton-padded clothes at night. No one would be able to see him. Yi Qian thought about it. Was this young man exploring his strength? After all, he had lived for a very long time, but had never received such a strange request. He definitely did not dare to fight Lu Shu. He did not attack because he knew how many experts were looking at him in the forest. Now, the young man had suddenly advanced. It was simply frightening. Furthermore, he was beside this young man when the young man had advanced. He was the most affected. Thus, Sun Zhongyang and the rest only knew that Lu Shu was powerful, but did not know the extent of this power. At that moment, Yi Qian could sense that this young man had no intention of breaking through, but suddenly exploded with power during the peace and quiet. Moreover, it was frightening thinking about what he had said. Even if we eventually die, that is the way of the world. Yi Qian did not even know that Lu Shu was bragging. He thought that it was Lu Shu's Tao. If this was his Tao, this meant that his belief resonated with the heaven and the earth. There was a saying in the Luniverse. When one advanced and resonated with the heaven and the earth, it was a process acknowledged by the heaven and the earth. If your Tao was great, but did not have the appropriate disposition or strength, you would definitely fail. Thus, if the words of this young man were a result of his willpower resonating with the heaven and the earth, and if he was acknowledged by the heaven and the earth, this was far too frightening. Furthermore, although Yi Qian was not a sensory type, the moment Lu Shu unlocked his celestial map, Yi Qian could feel Lu Shu's strength multiplying. It was as if half of his strength had been locked up. Thus, he could not fight him. If he did, he would really die. Yi Qian straightened out his thoughts and said, "Can you let me go? I have a lot of mercenary soldiers, and some savings." Lu Shu sighed silently. Could he encounter an obedient opponent for once? What should he do? He could not fight him, ahem, how much? Lu Xiaoyu was too lazy to say anything. She sat on the tree branch and folded her arms. She stared coldly at Lu Shu. How uninteresting. Yi Qian carefully looked up and glanced at Lu Xiaoyu. He suddenly realized that even though this girl was very young, she was giving him a lot of pressure. Where did this pair appear from? You would not be able to find such amazing geniuses even in the palace. Lu Shu looked at Lu Xiaoyu's expression. Suddenly, he said, I am not as greedy as you would expect. But you are lucky this time. Yi Qian was dumbfounded. How was he lucky? Look at it this way. After thinking about it, I feel that you are a talent. You were able to lead a group of disorganized soldiers and create a name for yourselves. This shows that you have excellent qualities. I want to give you an opportunity to follow me, said Lu Shu calmly. From Yi Qian's distress, plus 666. Yi Qian understood. He indirectly wanted money and directly wanted manpower. If the person belonged to you, their money would also belong to you, right? But Lu Shu thought that Yi Qian was very strong. If he were to lead a group of elite soldiers, they would become like the special forces. If he did not encounter Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu, he would not be in such a dire situation. Furthermore, the power that he portrayed when he advanced had to be kept secret. He also felt that Yi Qian was manpower that he could use. Thus, taking him in was Lu Shu's best choice. Yi Qian calmly said, Do you want me to be your slave? I'm afraid that that's not possible. Yi Qian had been free for many years. He had not relied on wealthy families or become the slaves of others in order to maintain his freedom. He could admit his fear in order to keep his power and life, but he would never sell himself. No, no, no. Lu Shu shook his head. I have never taken in any slaves. I want you to sign a treaty of alliance. A treaty of alliance? Yi Qian was dumbfounded. How do you know about the treaty of alliance? Lu Shu was dumbfounded as well. What, was the treaty of alliance that rare? Why would you know about the treaty of alliance? 12 swords of different lengths suddenly appeared from the box on his back. He was ready to attack at any time. The 12 swords had strange shapes. Lu Shu, who evidently had the upper hand, felt threatened. Lu Shu was curious. Is the Treaty of Alliance classified information? Suddenly, Lu Xiaoyu asked, Do you know Lu Yizhao, Zhang Weiyu, and Dong Yi? Yi Qian was ferocious. Who in the world are you? What did you do to Zhang Weiyu and the rest? Ahem, nothing, nothing. Lu Shu felt that Yi Qian was on his side. He asked curiously, Are you very familiar with them? Lu Yizhao is following me now. He has signed the Treaty of Alliance with me. As he spoke, Lu Shu took out a small and red flame-shaped object from between his eyebrows. If you looked carefully at it, you would be able to see the faint shadow of Lu Yizhao. This was part of Lu Yizhao's spirit that he had to give to Lu Shu when he signed the Treaty of Alliance. At that moment, Yi Qian kept all 12 swords into the box. When Lu Shu saw this, he beamed with joy. So you're on our side. But before Lu Shu could finish speaking, Yi Qian wailed and knelt on the ground, his face wet with tears. My king, I have been waiting for you for so long. Lu Shu was suddenly annoyed. Yi Qian cried as he signed the Treaty of Alliance. He did not hesitate at all. Lu Shu said patiently, You might have been mistaken. I am not a king. Yi Qian wiped his tears and said, Impossible. I have met Lu Yizhao a few times in Nanging City. I understand him the most. If he is not sure of your identity, why would he sign a treaty of alliance with you? While he spoke, Yi Qian knelt down and pressed his forehead on the ground as he cried. Yi Qian from the Imperial Dragon Soldiers will follow my king. I will not hesitate to defy all difficulties and dangers. Lu Shu felt, Lu Yizhao, it was a misunderstanding. But Lu Shu sighed with emotion. These people sacrificed everything they had for an illusory promise. No wonder these mercenary soldiers were so strong. Yi Qian had led them. But Lu Shu was suddenly pained. Had he suddenly killed his own comrades? Yi Qian seemed to understand what Lu Shu was thinking. My king, please do not feel that it is a pity. They were not fugitives that I had gathered. They have no loyalty. They only followed me to kill for profit. I have never passed down my techniques to them. Lu Shu furrowed his eyebrows. He was not a king. Don't call me king. Yi Qian seemed to understand. Yes, yes, yes. We have to be low-key. What would you like me to address you as? Great Commander? When Lu Shu thought about Sun Zhongyang and the rest outside, he stopped Yi Qian. Don't call me Commander either. Call me boss. Lu Shu thought. He could be considered the chairman of a company that monopolized the market, right? Chapter 979, Don't you want to reconsider? Recruiting Yi Qian was an accident, but it went surprisingly smoothly. Lu Shu was thinking about it as well. For example, if they had recruited the Imperial Dragon soldiers, how many people outside the settlement were like the lonely spirits? Who employed you guys? Asked Lu Shu curiously. Yi Qian shook his head. The people employed us because they did some shameful things. Therefore, they would definitely not reveal themselves. We also do not ever ask about their identity and will accept the task as long as we find it acceptable. I see. Lu Shu nodded. Do they have any other backups? I am not sure about this as well. Yi Qian shook his head. However, I think that without you, this time we would have been rather successful. The children of the Sun family and the rest had exhausted most of their energy as they did not expect to meet you. However, Yi Qian was still somewhat confused. Why was Lu Shu's swordplay so powerful? Is there anyone in there? Song Bo's voice could be heard. The people outside did not know what was happening after a long silence in the forest and sent Song Bo over to check it out. Song Bo was very weak. With the massive movement during the rise to rank 1, even 100 Song Boss would not be enough for the people in the forest. Sun Zhongyang and the rest were very confused. The movements brought by the rise to rank 1 was too big. However, shouldn't one continue with the fight after rising to rank 1? If it was quiet before the rise, it would be also very quiet after the rise. They did not know that Yi Qian would be so obedient. Song Bo saw what happened in front of him. Yi Qian and Lu Shu were discussing about something as though nothing had happened. Song Bo was scared to death. Was Lu Yulu really going to betray the rest? If the movement earlier on was caused by him, and he had reached an undisclosable agreement with the messed-up mercenaries, then everything would be over. Lu Shu turned and smiled at Song Bo. It's all right, everything has been settled. However, I said earlier on, you have to pay more for entering. Okay, I'll pay. Song Bo nodded anxiously. He was afraid that Lu Shu would kill him on the spot if he did not pay. Yi Qian was stunned when he witnessed this. To him, he should have been establishing his own career with Lu Shu, for example, fighting for several thousand years. However, it did not seem like the case. Could he really have been mistaken? However, Yi Qian was very sure about it. He had always been paying attention to Lu Yizhao. It was because he was the closest to Lu Yizhao in the past when he was one of the Imperial Dragon soldiers. Lu Yizhao would not sign a treaty of alliance with anyone if he was unsure of Lu Shu's identity. Therefore, the new king was certainly a little different from the past. After Lu Shu reached the trade caravan with Song Bo and Yi Qian, Sun Zhongyang was stunned. This brat is really planning to sell us? If he was not planning to sell them, why would he bring the leader of the mercenaries over? Lu Shu was unhappy when he heard what Sun Zhongyang said. Am I that kind of person? To me, money is not important. I am collecting money from you in order for you guys to understand that there's no free lunch in the world. You have to pay a price for everything you do. If not, I would definitely not collect money from you guys. Sun Zhongyang and the rest fell speechless when they heard what Lu Shu said. Mo Xiaoya almost exploded in rage. You don't want money? More like you don't want a small sum of money. Lu Shu felt that Mo Xiaoya really did not understand him well. He actually wanted a small sum of money too. Sun Zhongyang suddenly realized that the situation did not seem like they were being sold. Why did they start chit-chatting? Sun Zhongyang was examining Yi Qian carefully. He had a huge build and was wearing black armor, looking extremely powerful like the sun. This was the first time he had met the leader of the mercenaries. In the past, the Sun family had made deals with Yi Qian and tasked Yi Qian to do some shameful things on their behalf. However, Sun Zhongyang did not meet Yi Qian face-to-face before. However, why was Yi Qian following Lu Shu? Lu Shu smiled happily. I recruited him. He felt that he had a bright future if he followed me, so he decided to follow me. Sun Zhongyang was puzzled. What the f***ck? He looked at Yi Qian and said in surprise, are you not going to reconsider your decision? Lu Shu was speechless. Yi Qian was speechless. Sun Zhongyang felt that everything was messed up. How could he recruit a rank 1 expert just like that? Could it be that Yi Qian found out that Lu Shu's real identity was the descendant of the rear mountain of the sword hut, and decided to suck up to him? In fact, Sun Zhongyang wanted to befriend Lu Shu because based on the sound of Tao from the cry of the sword throughout the heaven and earth, Sound of Tao felt that apart from the rear mountain of the sword hut, nobody could call for such a massive phenomenon. In the Luniverse, the sword hut had the say to what the sword play looked like. At this moment, even Mo Xiaoya thought that Lu Shu had came from the rear mountain of the sword hut. Therefore, everyone's attitude towards Lu Shu had changed. Mo Xiaoya was still unhappy with Lu Shu. However, he was already a rank 1 expert. Although their safety was ensured, everyone could not accept it. In the past, everyone thought that the young man was an ordinary person. However, after some interaction, everyone started to feel less and less happy about him. They even thought that he could be from the rear mountain of the sword hut and therefore spoke to him with a friendlier tone. After all, it was the sword hut. No matter how rich one would not dare to oppose the sword hut. The trade caravan continued moving. The trade caravan was acting even stranger. The children of the rich tycoons were rushing to enter the city and Lu Xiaoyu was trying to travel as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Lu Shu was training in the carriage while Yi Qian was sitting on the top of the carriage. Sun Zhongyang and the rest looked at Lu Shu's carriage before looking at themselves. It was a completely different treatment. Initially, everyone was almost done recuperating. However, after the disruption caused by Lu Shu's rise, they had returned to what they were like before they were freed. They wasted their efforts recuperating. They felt angrier as they thought about it. At this moment, 2 black shadows flew from the sky. Mo Xiaoya looked up into the sky and heaved a sigh of relief. The expert of the family has arrived. He must have rushed over with all his might and reached earlier as expected. The expert of the Mo family had arrived. That implied that they were confirmed to be safe. Sun Zhongyang smiled. I can finally heave a sigh of relief. After reaching the palace, I will treat everyone to a good meal. The story about us fighting against the slaves is something worth mentioning at school. To Sun Zhongyang and the rest, there were too many sissies at school. There were many lazy gilded youths who admired those with capabilities. The slaves who Sun Zhongyang and the rest killed were famous people. They could brag about it until they graduated from school. However, at this moment, the expert of the Mo family who had arrived smiled in front of them. Xiaoya, Zhongyang, I told you two not to leave the palace. Now that you have learnt your lessons, what do you feel? Before Sun Zhongyang and Mo Xiaoya could speak, another person said in confusion, "Wasn't the battle 2 days ago? Why do you guys look like you have just been injured?" Sun Zhongyang and the rest were speechless for a long while. How should they answer that? They were embarrassed to admit that they had been accidentally injured by the sound of Tao. It was extremely embarrassing. The sound of Tao of Lu Yulu had to be reported to their family. However, Sun Zhongyang and the rest would definitely not admit that their injuries were related to the sound of Tao. Chapter 980, You've Gotten the Wrong Person. With the protection and escort of 2 experts from the Mo family, the trade caravan dared to approach the city. Thus, the quality of their equipment improved and their carriages were all replaced with new ones. It was as if they were competing with Lu Shu. Sun Zhongyang bought the most luxurious carriage. Although Sun Zhongyang did not bring much money out, Song Bo wanted to use Sun Zhongyang to elevate his relationship with the Sun family. The Sun family was one of the few very wealthy families in the palace. If not, the others would not have followed Sun Zhongyang out. But Song Bo was not the only one relying on the wealthy families for survival. Thus, Song Bo was rivals with the other slave owners. Whoever was better at business and could gain the favor of the master of the families would be able to obtain more resources. There was a possibility that Sun Zhongyang's father would become the next head of the Sun family. Song Bo was very excited. This was an opportunity that the heavens had bestowed upon him. He thanked the gods for their blessing and protection. The palace was separated into 9 and 5. The one on top would be the one who sat on the imperial throne. But the wealthy families were also divided into 9 and 5. There were 5 upper families and 9 lower families. This was something that they had all silently agreed upon. This meant that the 5 upper families were situated among the clouds. They were the most established. The 9 lower families were also able to look down upon the rest of the universe. All these families were the families that had fought alongside the old king of gods. They had a very wide influence. But now, the favors of the past had slowly been forgotten by the people. Many treated the events of the past as transactions and the sacrifice of lives. These families were bestowed luxury, wealth, and power. Out of all of these, profits were the most important. After Sun Zhongyang and the rest had replaced their carriages, they wanted to further anger Lu Shu. After all, they had already been angry for a period of time. But after the 2 experts from the Mo family arrived, Lu Shu waited inside the carriage. Even when they reached the city, he did not appear. It was as if what was happening outside had nothing to do with him. Sun Zhongyang and the rest had done all this for nothing. How terrible. This time, Sun Zhongyang happily paid Lu Shu a total of 4 million notes. This included the extra fees Song Bo incurred for stepping into the forest. Sun Zhongyang laughed and told Lu Shu that it would not be a problem for Lu Shu to obtain the armor he wanted. After they arrived at the palace, someone from the Sun family would specially engage in this deal with him. They would definitely be honest. The Sun family kept their promises. To Sun Zhongyang, although they would be able to obtain many sets of armor with 4 million notes, it was not everything that the Sun family had. They did not even have to buy armor from other families. But Lu Shu shook his head and said, "We promised that you would convert my money into armor. When we reach the palace, I will tell you exactly how much money I have. Furthermore, I will help you to find the commander of the Weiwu army, Lu Shu. I still have 3 million notes to earn from that." Sun Zhongyang suddenly had an unpleasant premonition, as he did not know how much money Lu Shu had. To be honest, after the experience with the gambling dens, he had many more ideas. The amount of money that the bankers earned from the gambling den was not a small amount. The 7 million notes that he had earned from Sun Zhongyang paled in comparison. But, were there any other ways to earn money? Lu Shu wanted to bring some local specialties back to the heavenly network. He had to do many things before he was good enough. If not, when he returned and bragged about his achievements as a commander, a pretty boy, and a disciple of the Sword Hut, but came back empty-handed, it would be very embarrassing. But Lu Shu did not know that whatever he wanted to brag about had already been exposed on his behalf to Earth by Li Ke. Very few people knew what Li Ke was talking about, but there was no suspense. Those who knew what Lu Shu had done in the Luniverse all felt as if their lives were grotesque and bizarre. Their ninth heavenly king had completely integrated into their world and had amazing achievements. When Li Yixiao heard that Lu Shu's motto in the Luniverse was escape poverty and make a fortune, his eyes lit up. He waited beside the pathway with Chen Zuan and Cheng Qiuqiao every day, but the pathway did not open up. In this period of time, everyone was surprised that Cheng Qiuqiao was waiting by the pathway as well. Even after Chen Zuan and Cheng Qiuqiao had given up, he did not. What was even more surprising was that Nie Ting came to Luo City more often. After Lu Shu had treated the heavenly network as his home, he was no longer as petty as before. He could even be called heroic. People had to grow up. Lu Shu had already acknowledged his identity as a heavenly king. Now, he thought that the local specialties that he brought back would become the bargaining chip between the heavenly network and the realm of cultivation on Earth. The two experts from the Mo family felt that Lu Shu was somewhat strange. They asked Sun Zhongyang and Mo Xiaoya about the situation, but they stammered. They did not want to admit that they were alive because they had been protected by this fellow. Although the experts from the Mo family had come in advance, they would have died under Yi Qian without Lu Shu. Ahem. They are the passengers in the trade caravan. They are going to the palace, said Sun Zhongyang in a small voice. Yes, 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 echoed everyone in a small voice. For some reason, although they clearly knew that Lu Shu was from the rear mountain of the Sword Hut, and was a rank 1 expert, and admitting that they were protected by him would not be embarrassing, Sun Zhongyang and the rest all felt that it was odd. 7 days later, as the trade caravan was traveling, another caravan passed by them and kicked up a huge cloud of dust. Lu Shu poked his head out of the carriage and looked at the caravan that passed by them. He was somewhat curious. There were 7 rank 2 experts in the caravan. Yi Qian seemed to have sensed Lu Shu's uncertainty. What he was doing was the most dangerous. Typically, he would have access to channels of communication that circulated classified information. Mercenary soldiers like them had already established a perfect information network. Not only were there assassins, there were people who sold information. Yi Qian looked at the caravan and said, "There is the seal of an aristocrat in Fujin City on the horse. The one leading the caravan should be a rare genius in their family. His family had bought him a nomination to the Sword Hut selections. They should also be headed for the palace." Lu Shu looked at Yi Qian. He was puzzled. Yi Qian was able to guess their identity and motives just by looking at a seal. He was a talent among the Imperial Dragon soldiers. Typical people would not pay attention to the seal printed on the buttock of a horse, right? Lu Shu softly muttered to Yi Qian. Suddenly, Yi Qian looked at the caravan and carelessly said, "Boss, I think Lu Shu is inside that caravan." Before Lu Shu could say anything, Sun Zhongyang and the rest flew out. They had been dejected this entire trip. They could not find anyone to take out their anger on. There were 6 rank 1s. The caravan was so scared that they did not dare to retaliate when they knew that Sun Zhongyang and the rest had no intention of killing them. Back then, when they were fighting the thieves, they used this method as well. Did the children of wealthy families need a reason to fight people? No. But Sun Zhongyang and the rest threw caution to the wind and beat them up. However, they heard Lu Shu say to Yi Qian, "I think that you've gotten the wrong person." From Sun Zhongyang's distress, plus 666. From Mo Xiaoya's. The people who had been beaten up could not understand what was happening. But they faintly sensed that they had been beaten up for nothing. They had vomited blood. How would they be able to participate in the Sword Hut selections? Before Lu Shu reached the palace, the 47 candidates for the Sword Hut selection dropped to 46.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to the heavens,